In Genesis 1:1, we meet the God that we already know. Yes, we meet the infinite God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning of what? The answer? Everything. Whatever you can think of, God came before that. Before the earth was, before there was any molecules or atoms or parts of atoms, before anything, before even height or width or depth, before this reality existed, God was there. Even before you could say before, which means before there was time, God was. So he's not like the gods of many of the religions that man has created. He didn't spring forth from something, nor was he a spawn of another creature or another god. God has always existed. Moses knew this to be true, just like Abraham, who called God the everlasting God. Moses would also remind the Israelites in Deuteronomy 33:27 that God is the eternal God. And so God is introduced to us again as the infinite God. He is in the beginning. Before anything, there was God. Also in Genesis 1:1, we're introduced to the fact that God is a creator God. God created the heavens and the earth. That's a great statement, but what are the implications of God creating the heavens and the earth? Well, there's a lot of things we can get from this, but I'm going to give you a few. First of all, that God is sovereign, which means he is the one who possesses the highest authority without control of another. We are not commanders of our own destinies. We're not sovereign. We're not in control. God is in control. Second, God is self-sufficient, which means he doesn't need anything. He didn't need to create. He chose to create. God created heavens and earth because he wanted to. He doesn't lack anything. He doesn't need our worship. He doesn't need anything. He's self-sufficient. We are not self-sufficient. We need everything given to us. Number 3 is that the teaching that God created the heavens and the earth is countercultural. It was countercultural back then. It went against the religions of the day. It went against where the Israelites were coming out of. It went against Egypt and all the gods that they had. And it's not popular even today. It's countercultural today. The idea that God created the heavens and the earth. Another implication that we get from this first verse of the Bible is that we cannot define our own reality, since God created reality. He created it, he defines it. So what are all the definitions? They're all given to us by God. What is love? What is truth? What is good? What is evil? Those are all defined by God, not by us. We can't make that stuff up. We don't have the right because we didn't create this universe. God did. He set all the rules. He said what is good and what's bad. And he has the right to do that because he's God and the creator. Another thing that we learn also too is that matter exists. Things exist. Because God created them, they exist. The spirit world exists. Matter, physical reality exists. But the truth is that God is above both of those. He's outside those. Those things are created things. He's outside of that. He is not one of those things. The last one is that this idea of God created the heavens and the earth should lead us eventually to Jesus Christ. Colossians chapter 1 says that all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So Genesis 1:1 eventually has to lead us to Jesus. Because if we're going to study Genesis 1:1 and understand what that means, we have to eventually come to the fact that it was by Jesus and for Jesus that all things were created. And lastly, I want to talk to you about Genesis 1:1 lets us know about the known God. In the beginning, God created. This is a God that we already know. We may not know Jesus personally, but we do know God. We know this creator God. We know this infinite God. The reason why Moses doesn't go into detail about explaining or trying to prove that God exists, he doesn't try to give you all these evidences to prove that God exists. He's really here, guys. Yahweh is real. The I am is true. He doesn't do that. He just assumes that God exists, and he assumes that people already know that. And Paul picks up that idea in Romans chapter 1 and explains further in further detail in verses 19 through 20. Here's what Paul says. He says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." So that means that when Moses wrote this about God, people already knew who he was. They had already seen his invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature. They already knew those things, even before Moses came back and said, "Hey, I am has sent me to set you free." They already knew that God. And the fact is, we all know that God. We all know him. The reason why people say, "Well, I don't believe in God," is because they have traded the truth that they already know for a lie. That's Paul's point here. God has made his existence clear to them. He has plainly shown that to everyone since the creation of the world. So there is no excuse, because everyone has come after the creation of the world. And if he's clearly made it plain to every single person, then you, me, everyone else in the universe has known that God. Reason why we think we don't know him, or maybe we don't care, is because we like the lies better than the truth. So Genesis 1:1 introduces us to this known God, this God that we already know, this infinite creator God.